And Israel certainly is bleeding out economically. Their military is overextended. Reservists don't want to go back. Some, as reported, like in St. Haaretz, don't want to go back because of the crimes of what they're taking part in, but many of them don't want to go back because they're exhausted. Um, and this was an issue you saw between the former defense minister Yoav Gallant and the prime minister, this overextension of the army. Um, the economy is bleeding out. There's all kinds of data that shows that, whether it's fact that both imports and exports have dropped by 35%, something like close to over 40,000 Israeli businesses have closed. I mean, you see it in all this data that's available. And when you're there, you see it too, Eleanor. Like the hotel we stayed at in East Jerusalem, it had been closed for 10 months before we showed up. And after we were leaving, it was closing again. You be in the old city, and there was people weren't there. The stalls and the shops, the vendors for the local folks were open, so the food and the household goods and things like that. But there weren't that many souvenir shops that were open. I mean, we went to the Temple Mount one day. We had a free morning because what happened, we were supposed to meet people, and the Israelis wouldn't let them, Palestinians, they wouldn't let them into Jerusalem. So we ended up having a free morning. So we did some sightseeing. We went to the Temple Mount, which has just people have been unbelievable view of the old city. And this is Friday morning at 10 a.m. Absolutely gorgeous, 70 degrees, blue skies. And we had the whole place to ourselves. There should have been 5,000 other people up there with us. I mean, so you see that very clearly in how are they still surviving then? And why do they have confidence that they can carry this out? Because of the backing of the United States. So what you've had happen in the last year is Israel has sold 4 times as many bonds as they usually sell. And you look at all the economic numbers, you look at the political chaos, you look at the government, you look at the wars, they're fighting on 7 fronts. The Israeli bond should be terrible. No one should want to buy that. But why are they able to sell so many? Because they have the backing of the United States. The United States has a loan guarantee with Israel that essentially ensures that Israeli debt is backed by the U.S. as their guarantor. So, put in simple terms, it's essentially as if you and Lee want to buy a house and you've got Bill Gates or Elon Musk as your co-signer. I mean, like kind of you're going to get what you want. And then overly simplifying it, but that's the reality is that for decades, the United States has had these loan guarantees with Israel. They start, a lot of it's got to do with the resettlement of Jews from Russia, from the former Soviet Union, but it extends beyond that. And even if you look at the program itself, there's only about $4 billion that Congress keeps in a pot for this. But everyone understands that it doesn't matter. The Congress will do whatever it needs to, it will appropriate whatever it needs to support Israel. So this is why Israel is able to remain afloat this way. So even though there are all these cracks, there's a political issue, certainly within Israel itself, the political tensions, the cultural tensions are very severe. Ronan Bar, who is the head of the Shin Bet essentially is their rough equivalent of the FBI. So the head of Israeli internal security, about 4 months ago, sent a letter to the cabinet saying, look, the biggest threat that we have in Israel is Jewish extremism. The biggest threat that we have in this country is violence from within our own people. And so there's that danger. So of course you have all of that could cause things to collapse. The Israelis are confident that they can get through the next year or two, do what they have to do with the West Bank, and then things will go back to normal. And we've seen that to a degree with reports of the Saudis already talking to the Israelis about normalization. Certainly they'll have the back of the Americans, and that essentially I think is all that they care about, and that all they should care about is all that matters. And that the idea is that we get back to normal in a couple of years. We've annexed the West Bank, we've destroyed Gaza, and people don't care. And it's back to business, and the Christian tour groups show up and they get back on their buses and they can go to the church. It's amazing. If you're a Christian tour group going to Palestine, going to visit, say, Jesus's birthplace, the Church of the Nativity, you can go from Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv, from the airport, from Jerusalem, wherever, into Bethlehem without ever seeing the apartheid wall. It's amazing. And so the complicity of all this has always been there. And I think the Israelis are quite confident that the complicity will return.